I've spent the last 4 months making this as perfect as I can, and after countless revisions, it's finally done. This weird ergonomic fingertip grip gaming mouse turned out way better than I could have expected. So what started as a pretty vague idea, and honestly more than anything just a bit of a fun video for me to work on, has ended in a pretty nice upgrade over my M2K. It's completely wireless, no more cable, has a better sensor, it can run at higher polling rates, and it has a more ergonomic grip. Rewinding back to that first video, I took the internals from the Razer Viper V2, designed an entirely new lightweight shell, 3D printed it in resin, and the result was a pretty good proof of concept. It was a bit rough around the edges, that first concept, but man, I was really blown away by how good it felt. I mean, it was the lightest wireless gaming mouse in the world. It was so good, in fact, that I just kept using that very basic prototype for the next couple of months. But yeah, since then, I have made it even better. And I mean, I've now iterated on this thing over 200 times, dialing in the tolerances, the position of the standoffs, the sensor height, the position and width of the grips. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. If there was something that I thought I could improve about it, then I would do it. Also, I think now I can finally appreciate how many things actually go into making a gaming mouse feel good. Like things you wouldn't even think about, and tolerances that you wouldn't even think make a difference really make a meaningful impact. One of the biggest things that I've added since that first video is a scroll wheel. Now, it's pretty much essential for games like Apex. If you don't have a scroll wheel, you can't tap strafe, and then you're at a severe disadvantage. And I mean, just like everything, there's a bit of trial and error, there's a bit of fine tuning, but I mean, in the end, it feels good. Really good clicks, and the scroll is really smooth as well. I've also changed the shape. Now, it may look the same at first glance, but a lot of fine tuning has been done. The concept of the shape is, yeah, something that is optimized for fingertip grip, but not something so small that most would find it impossible to hold comfortably. In a way, I don't want to be gripping this mouse or trying to hold onto it like a normal mouse. I want it to sit between my fingertips as relaxed as possible. I don't want to be pinching it or squeezing it like you kind of have to with the M2K or the HSK from G-Wolves. At least in my experience, the more intuitively and relaxed you can hold a mouse, the better you will perform with it. Another reason for this is the position of the sensor, which on the PCB that we're using is the Viper V2. The sensor here sits really far back, so if I made the mouse any shorter, the sensor would sit right at the back of the mouse, which just wouldn't feel nice to use at all. So for a more natural feeling input, I've got the sensor here sitting right in front of your thumb, which is actually pretty similar to the G Pro Superlight. I've also angled the thumb and pinky contact points inwards by a few degrees and downwards too, giving the mouse a little bit more stability. On the first version, these were completely straight, and the grip width has been narrowed by a few millimeters at least. In the end, yeah, it is a more comfortable aiming experience than before. The main triggers are also now at an angle, which looks like a design error, it looks like a mistake, but it is 100% intentional. And the reason for that is if you take a look at the Zowie EC or the Death Adder V3, which are regarded as some of the most comfortable mice on the planet, these both have angle triggers. And yet they're ergonomic mice, but it kind of just makes sense, right? Your hands, when you're holding these mice, your fingers are approaching those main triggers at an angle, so it is more comfortable to have the triggers angled that way. But even if I'm holding something like the Superlight, I don't know, I just find my hand is like rotated naturally when I'm holding it, and my fingers just kind of naturally sit at a bit of a slope. One thing that has not changed though is the reverse trigger design. As you can see, it's a very unique kind of way to design the triggers. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's like way better than every other trigger design on the planet, but I do think for a 3D printed mod kit, it does work extremely well. There are no screws, there are no hinges, you can print the entire thing as a single piece, and to be honest, in the end, they turned out way better than I expected. Maybe the lightest clicks that I've ever felt on a gaming mouse. Now, to actually iterate on all of these changes, I did need a more reliable and accurate 3D printing method, because originally 3D printing in resin, that was okay to like get the ball rolling and see if this thing would actually work, but since then, actually quite a while ago, I've completely outsourced all of the 3D printing to a company in Singapore called Zelta 3D. And yeah, this really turned up the quality quite a few notches, and it really freed up so much of my own time when it comes to cleaning up the prints, the post-processing, and all of that stuff. Resin is really not a nice medium to work with. With Zelta 3D though, I mean, I just send them the file, pay a small fee, and then within a few days, I have the new model. And I did that more times than I can count. Each time just improving the design a little bit more. Even if it was just lowering the triggers by 0.2 millimeters to reduce pre-travel a little bit more, more, then it was worth doing. For me, this design process and journey of making something as good and refined as I can was highly addictive. And now I've kind of reached a point with this project where I don't think I can make it any better. For me, this is the best gaming mouse that I've ever tried. The aiming feel is just effortless. Whether I'm doing a big swipe or micro tracking across the map, it just feels so nice to use. I have done some Kovacs tracking scenarios as well, compared it to other mice that I have, like the M2K or my modded Superlight. And yeah, scores are a little bit better, but for me, it's mostly about that feeling. It really does feel like I'm not holding anything at all when I play. Like, there's no cable, it's only 29 grams, the ergonomic shape is really comfortable for me personally, I don't have to like squeeze it or anything like that, and it can run it up to 4000 hertz. Now, the creation of this thing in the beginning, I did not expect to like sell it or anything like that. I thought it would be a pretty fun video, which it was, but I didn't even expect the thing to be good, let alone so many of you to actually want one as well. And originally, after all of the enthusiasm, I thought, okay, I'll just give away the 3D file, but here's why I decided against that. First of all, this is not a basic 3D print, and I definitely don't want you guys wasting your time and money trying to print this thing correctly. The wall thicknesses are very small, the feel of the triggers change completely depending on what plastic you use. Even on a high resolution resin printer, which is what I used for development, I can't honestly say that any of my prints were perfect. Even the best ones still had scarring from the supports or a tiny bit of warping, and that really bothered me. So for those of you who do want one, I have made a small kit. Instead of you paying 30 to 40 bucks to get this thing printed, then buying the grips and the glides and paying shipping for all of those things separately, here it is in one single product. The only thing it does not include is the Razer Viper V2 Pro's PCB, which is kind of the main part, so think of this as a mod kit for the Razer Viper V2. The grips here as well are actually Pulsar super grips, and they're a perfect stencil for each contact point. So huge shout out to Pulsar for letting me buy a whole bunch of these and for actually cutting them for me as well. Big fan of how these grips feel, and they're a huge upgrade to that base 3D printed surface. Same to Tiger Esports and their PTF e-skates, which are also included in the kit. These things are super fast. Moving forward though, I actually want to make this thing even better. I want to make it more accessible, also a higher quality, something like injection molding, and maybe even using my own internals rather than having to use a mod kit. More than anything as well, I kind of just want to learn new stuff, challenge myself, improve, and also just make stuff better. This project is complete. It's pretty much as far as I can take a 3D printed mod kit, but this ergonomic fingertip grip mouse concept, which I'm really a big fan of, I know I can make it even better. I guess finishing this project, sure, the aiming feel of under 30 grand wireless with super light clicks is in a different league. I honestly forget how good it is until I use something that's heavier. I have also grown an appreciation for more refinement. Products that are top tier in performance, but are also aesthetic and they look good on your desk. Mod kits like this one are cool, but they also promote waste, and they're also not very cost effective. And in the end, they're still gonna look really DIY no matter how polished you make them. Don't get me wrong, I've poured my entire soul into this thing, and the performance is just unrivaled. I absolutely love it. But for now, let's just refer to it as a prototype, because I do have a longer term vision for what I want to make this into. So if you're also interested in transforming your Viper V2 into something that looks like this and is honestly kind of freaky to aim with, then I will leave some links down below in the description, kind of saves you printing it yourself. I'll also mention that this is probably going to be the only batch of these that I'm going to do. I've made about 200 of them. Kind of just really want to get moving on to that next step of making this thing a whole lot better.